Hey guys, it's Aman and Christina from the Our Rich Journey podcast. Welcome back to another episode of the show. We have a question today about calculating your FIRE number and how much you need to invest in order to reach that goal. Oh, financial independence is just amazing. We wear it well, if I must say so myself.
You should say so yourself. Okay, yes. So I like this question because we're going to be breaking down the fundamental of FIRE and understanding what your goal is, right? So let's listen to the question first, and then we'll get into the answer.
Hello, Aman and Christina. Thank you guys so much for all you do. I really appreciate it. My question for you guys today is to please help me out to calculate my FIRE number. And not only that, but most importantly, to calculate how much should I be putting aside every month to be able to reach my goal. I would like to retire in 10 years. We are a family of 5. We have 3 kids. Our net worth is around 600K, which is our primary home, which is 400K and 200 in investment like 401K and IRA. So we make around 130K a year, and we want to retire in 10 years. Our monthly expense is around 5K, and I would like to know how much should I put aside if we want to invest in real estate and in the stock market. So we are all over the place right now, and we want some guidance because we are putting money aside to wait for the right time to buy in Florida, which is very expensive, the rental property. I would like to buy at least 3 and put it in the Airbnb. And also we would like to put money into the stock market. Can you guys please help me out and put like a plan or some sort of numbers so I know if I can reach my goal in 10 years? So some guidance will be grateful. Thank you so much, guys, for all you do, and have a nice day.
Okay, so there are a lot of different moving pieces to this question. And first, I want to explain an acronym just so we're all on the same page. The first question was, how do you calculate your FIRE number? So for people that aren't familiar with what a FIRE number is, it's your financial independence retire early number. That means that's the amount of money that you need in a stock portfolio in order to be financially independent and to retire early. Because the idea is once you have this number, once you reach this number, you'll be able to pull from your stock portfolio in order to pay for all of your expenses throughout retirement.
Now, everyone should know their FIRE number because it is your freedom number. It is the number that you would need in order to walk away from your job and say, I don't need to take this mess anymore. So having that number in your back pocket and knowing how you are tracking towards it, it is such an empowering thing to have. It was a number, we had 3 FIRE numbers because at any moment we wanted to know where we were going to end up if we were to retire early. And we're going to get into why we had 3 FIRE numbers. But just know that you must calculate this number. Everyone should have one.
You know, if you've been listening closely, you heard we're talking about it's the amount of money you need in a stock portfolio. But the question wasn't specific to stocks. She said, how much do I need to invest in the stock market and how much should I invest in real estate? She was asking about both of these things. So I want to break it down to identify how you calculate your FIRE number, which is related to your stock portfolio, and how real estate investments play a role in that overall FIRE number. So when you are looking to find out what your FIRE number is, you are creating a budget for your anticipated expenses in retirement. That's the key word. It's not your budget right now. It's what you anticipate your expenses are going to be in retirement. So you calculate that. You calculate your annual expenses in retirement. You multiply those annual expenses by 25, and that is your FIRE number. That is the amount of money that you need in a stock portfolio in order to reach financial independence and to retire early.
Well, so she knows her annual expenses, but they're her current annual expenses. Because, well, she said on average her family was spending about $5,000 a month. 5 times 12, 60. 60 times 25 is $1.5 million. That's how much she would need in just a stock portfolio in order to achieve financial independence and retire early.
Yeah, I mean, that is assuming if those were the same expenses when she retired.
Yes.
Those are the same anticipated expenses. That's an example of how to do it. But my guess is that when you retire, your expenses are not going to be $5,000. If your expenses right now are $5,000 a month, when you retire, I anticipate that they will not be $5,000 a month. Just because when you retire, you have different expenses. You know, you have to assume your own healthcare costs, for example, or maybe you're traveling more, or maybe you're further down the line, so your housing expenses are less. So just because your annual expenses are a certain amount now, that doesn't translate into what they would be in retirement. And another thing, even if they were on the same plane as when you retire, you have to take into account inflation, right? So if you plan on retiring, for example, 10 years from now, inflation has its role and
Yes.
expenses are going to be more. So you have to take that into account of really understanding what you think those anticipated expenses are, and then that's how you're gonna use that information to calculate your fire number. Now, for people who are thinking, how am I really gonna know what are my expenses 10 years from now when I retire? Right now, the idea is to get your best estimate. It's your anticipated number. That fire number could change. It could go up or down in the future. And then as you get closer to actually reaching fire, you're still modifying that number. You're going through, you're analyzing your budget for your anticipated expenses in retirement. You're looking at everything, reviewing it, and updating it. So your fire number that you calculate today may change as the years go on and as you get closer to fire. As you get closer to fire, you'll have an even better understanding of what those expenses will be. But you have to start with something. You have to do your best to calculate it and have that as your goal, and just keep reviewing it in the future as things move on. Now, I do want to address this specific question because we talk a lot about how you can calculate your fire number if you were just investing in stocks. But she's talking about also investing in real estate. And she also has, I believe she said $400,000 of equity in her home. Now
that brings up that's interesting because, you know, when she was talking about her net worth, she included the equity of the home in her net worth. And that's absolutely fine when you're talking about net worth. Right, so her net worth is $600,000, which congratulations on having that net worth. That is amazing. But the net worth does not correlate to you reaching your fire number. So if her net worth is $600,000, but her fire number is $1.2 million, it doesn't mean that she's halfway to her fire number because her net worth is $600,000. And the reason being is because the majority of her net worth is actually in her home equity. And this is a mistake that a lot of people make when they're calculating their fire number, is that they include their home equity towards their fire number. But see, your home equity is not like having money in the stock market or in an investment that is going to be yielding you some sort of dividend interest or capital gains. Your home equity is just in your house. You cannot live off of that equity. So just be careful of this when you're doing this calculation. Now, what home equity does do for you, especially if you have a home that is completely paid off, is it reduces your annual expenses in retirement because you don't have a mortgage to pay for because your home is totally paid off, right? So I know that's what you were going to say. You were going to go to that home equity and the fact that she was alluding to that being a part of her fire number.
Right. So I would say when you are developing your anticipated expenses in retirement, you itemize all of your expenses. Housing costs is an expense that you need to itemize. So for example, say you have $400,000 equity in your house like this caller has, and you have paid off your entire home. You don't have a mortgage and you're not paying rent. So where most people will have a line item for their housing costs for a mortgage or rent, this caller would have zero there. So it's going to reduce those total expenses that they have. It's going to reduce the total annual expenses. And when you multiply those annual expenses by 25, you're going to have a lower number because you don't have that big mortgage or rent payment that you have to make each month. Now, don't make the mistake, though, that just because your home is paid off, you don't have maintenance fees or HOA or taxes. You still have to include those. But the fact that you have, for example, your home paid off, that can significantly reduce your overall anticipated expenses in retirement, which will also reduce that FIRE number. Now, I also want to talk about, this caller had also mentioned the idea of investing in real estate. So say you live in your home and then you also want to invest in real estate. When you invest in real estate, how does that play into your FIRE number? So we'll go back to this idea that you have maybe a $1.2 million FIRE number. Now, this is because you're going to be paying your expenses from your stock portfolio. That's if you were to pay all of your expenses from your stock portfolio. But if you invest in real estate, the profit that you get from real estate can also help offset those expenses. So let's go back to, and I'm gonna do this math in my head, so I'm gonna keep it simple. Let's say you have anticipated your expenses in retirement to be $50,000. You also anticipate that you're going to have a investment property, and the profits from that investment property, you're going to get $10,000 a year from that investment property. So if your expenses are $50,000, those $10,000 in profits from real estate can help to pay for those expenses. So instead of saying $50,000 times 25, you get to say $50,000. Now I'm subtracting $10,000 because my real estate income is coming into that. So then I have $40,000 of expenses left to pay that are going to be covered by my stock portfolio. So I'm going to take $40,000, multiply that by 25, and that is the FIRE number.
Oh, beautiful. I love it when you break down the FIRE number explanation. I could just sit here all day.
Could you
In
now?
fact, I thought I was sitting here as a listener. I thought, wait, I better say something.
Okay, I was worried you were going to say, I almost fell asleep.
No. I mean, it's so beautiful to see you go through the process, because it's, you simplify it.
I hope so.
But calculating your FIRE number, there are a lot of moving pieces to it, and it's something that we think that, on the surface, do it with your budget, but there are other things that you have to take into account, especially because you're talking about your anticipated expenses in early retirement. And if you're a family that's pursuing FIRE, I love the fact that this is a family pursuing FIRE, but it also means there are a lot more moving pieces. They have 3 kids. Do they anticipate paying for their children's school? Do they anticipate other things that they're going to be on the hook for as parents? Maybe they have elderly parents. Maybe, there's so many things that they have to take into account. But the fact that you summarize something like the FIRE number in the way that you do is just beautiful to see.
Well, thank you so much. Now let's talk about what she said. The most important question was,
Yes.
was beyond calculating it, how do you know how to get there?
How
How
do
do
you
you
know
know about how much you need to invest? And we're number crunchers, right?
That's actually the easy part.
It is.
I think, calculating your FIRE number by identifying all of your expenses, all your that's the hard part. How you get to your FIRE number, it's actually relatively simple.
Yeah, and so I would say the easiest way is to pull up a compound interest calculator. Understand what your FIRE number is, taking into account the different profits that you're going to be getting from real estate and the remaining amount that you need to get in a stock portfolio. Take that ultimate FIRE number, put it into a compound calculator, decide how many years out. I think this caller said she wants to retire in 10 years, and figure out with that calculator how much you would have to invest over a 10-year period, and do it monthly. A monthly investment every single year for 10 years, how much you need in order to get to that point. Now, I anticipate that this caller will be thinking, well, okay, I could do that, but what's my return going to be? When you use a compound interest calculator, you have to input the interest, right? The anticipated interest. So when we did this, we used a 10% yield, a 10% interest rate return on our investment. That's how we calculated how far out we would be in order to reach our goal. And the reason why we did that is, we said this before, but the average total stock market return over a long period of time annually has been 10%. Now, if we were going to do this if we wanted to retire in 1 year, we wouldn't use 10%. It'd be such a short period of time, and there's so much volatility in the market that we wouldn't use 10%. But you're talking about retiring in 10 years. So that was actually our goal. We put different numbers into a compound interest calculator and looked at different amounts that we could add every single month with a 10% return. And then that gave us the amount that we needed to invest each month. And that's really what you need to do. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to get 10% return on your investment. You could get more, you could get less, depending on your investment. But that's sort of a good baseline to really understand how much should you ultimately be putting into your investment in order to reach your final goal.
Yeah, I mean, you really back your way out of the number and you see, okay, if my number is $1.2 million, how much do I need to invest every month with an 8% return or a 10% return in order to reach that goal? And so when you know how much you have to invest every month, you take a look at your spending. You take a look at maybe you need to make more money in order to reach those goals. Or maybe you're right on track because you've been living on just one income your entire time and wow, you'll be fire in no time. And for us, I know when we calculated our number, we realized that okay, we need to be more intentional about our spending. We need to prioritize things a lot more because we need to get our savings and investing rate up. We should probably do a whole podcast just on savings rate and how important that is and how the savings rate correlates to you achieving financial independence. Because I'll just quickly say this, traditionally, people have been taught to save for retirement by saving maybe 10 or 15% of their income in order to retire in 40 years, right? To retire by age 60 or 65. That's just saving 10 or 15% of your income. You'll get there in 40 years. But if you want to retire in 10 years, you see how you have to save more in order to reach that goal sooner? So you have to save a lot more of your income. You have to be saving 40, 50, 60, 70% of your income in order to move that retirement date up. Now, this may sound like something that is like, oh my goodness, I can barely save 15% of my income. How do I get to the point where I'm saving 70% of the income? Well, you also have to turn on the make more money side of the equation, right? That was a big part of our journey. We figured out a way to make more money with our side hustles, with our real estate profits, so that we could invest more money into the stock market. That's how you get your savings rate up. You have to get on the ball with the side hustles.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, there is one other thing that I want to address with this question, and you actually alluded to it earlier when you said we'll talk about why we had multiple FIRE numbers and how we address that, right?
Yes.
Because we told you how to calculate your FIRE number. If you're thinking about retiring in 10 years, you may not necessarily know where you want to retire. Maybe you have your anticipated numbers for if you retire at point A versus point B versus point C, and all of them have different expenses. Maybe one is super high that yields a really high FIRE number, and then one has a much lower cost of living, and if you go for that one, you're going to have a lower FIRE number. And that's actually what we did, right? We thought about different places where we would retire. We are from the Bay Area, the San Francisco Bay Area, so we calculated our FIRE number for that. We calculated our FIRE number for Portugal, for Thailand. I mean, we had all of these different sort of running numbers and different budgets for where we would ultimately retire, because throughout our journey, we didn't have an absolute idea of where we would ultimately be.
We
right?
have flexibility.
That's it. I like that word better, flexibility. And so what we did, because we had multiple FIRE numbers, we actually based our goal, our FIRE number, off of the most expensive place to live for us, which was the San Francisco Bay Area. And I'll tell you why we did that. It is because we ultimately ended up in Portugal. That's where we are right now. But we had this concern that if we were to move to Portugal and we didn't like it for whatever reason, or maybe we loved it, but for whatever reason, we were forced to come back home, and home for us is the San Francisco Bay Area. The cost of living in Portugal is much lower than the cost of living in the Bay Area. So if we would have ultimately said, we want to reach our FIRE number that's associated with living in Portugal, we hit that number, and then if we were retired right there, if we found ourselves in a situation where for whatever reason Portugal didn't work out, we would not have that fire number money in order to live or return back to the Bay Area. So for sort of safety, as a safety net, we went for the higher fire number.
And it meant that we had to work a little longer. But short-term sacrifice has led to a lifetime of freedom.
Yes.
This is what the fire journey is all about. You are making relatively short-term sacrifices in order to get to this point where you never have to work again. And that's the real takeaway when it comes to calculating your fire number and pursuing FIRE, the financial independence, retire early piece. Because we could all eventually achieve financial independence if we're given enough time, right? But we want to expedite that. We want to take our time back sooner. We want to walk away from those 40 hours of work, and we want to turn those into the 40 hours that we use however we see fit.
I love it.
It is so important that we all recognize what we are doing when we are pursuing FIRE.
Right.
That's key.
Okay, so that is the answer to that question. Can we give a homework assignment today? I feel like let's do some homework.
You know what? You know what I want everyone to do? Calculate 3 fire numbers.
Ooh.
Right? That's what we had. We had 3 fire numbers based off of 3 locations that we could potentially end up retiring to. Now, you don't have to get into a bunch of different spreadsheets and budgets. Just do a ballpark figure. Calculate or anticipate how much it would cost to retire in Portugal, in Spain, in Thailand, in Japan, wherever the case may be. But come up with 3 locations and have your 3 fire numbers of places where you could see yourself achieving financial independence and retiring early too.
Okay, and then I'm going to add an add-on to that homework assignment because, like the caller said, the most important thing was not only knowing what your fire number is, but understanding what it takes to get there within a certain period of time. So after you've calculated those different fire numbers, I would also encourage you to pull up a compound interest calculator, plug in some numbers, and understand how much you would have to invest each month over the period of time that you want to reach your FIRE goal, and understand how much you need to be investing to reach that goal. So that's the second, I guess, part B to the homework assignment. But we hope we answered your question. We hope you have fun with this homework assignment. And if you guys have questions for us, make sure you go to ourrichjourney.com/podcast. Leave your questions for us so that we can answer it in a future episode. And until then, we will see you and enjoy your day. Remember that we are not financial advisors and the views expressed by us are solely for entertainment purposes. You must make responsible decisions, and that means making decisions based on the thorough, independent research that you conduct. Thanks for listening.